It was the fall of 1887 when a stranger slipped into Willow Creek. Quiet as dusk and twice as worn, the nights had turned brittle by then. Frost crept over the ground, and the air snapped like glass. Just beyond the edge of town, a woman wandered into the shadow of an old chicken coop and didn't come back out. No one saw her arrive. She didn't pass through the station or the mercantile. She came with nothing but a frayed satchel and the look of someone running from something mean and patient. Boone Merritt wasn't one to go poking where he wasn't invited. He had fence rails to brace, wood to split, mouths to feed. Life left little room for anything unexpected. But on the third morning, his chickens refused to quiet. Wouldn't roost, wouldn't feed. Squawked and scratched like a storm was coming from the inside out. Boone crossed the yard, feed sack over his shoulder, boots crunching frost. He opened the coop door, expecting a fox, maybe, or a broken roost. What he found instead was a woman. She was curled in the far corner, half buried in straw, her dress torn at the hem, her boots soaked through and stiff with cold. One hand clutched a battered satchel, the other tucked beneath her cheek. She was asleep, bone deep. Dreamless sleep. The kind that comes after you've outrun your strength. She'd been there 3 days, though he wouldn't know it until later. 3 nights of frost, hunger, and silence lying beside chickens and ghosts alike. The door creaked. The light shifted. She stirred, then bolted upright, eyes wild, body rigid with fear. "Don't scream," she rasped, voice cracked and dry. "Please, I'll leave. Just let me catch my breath." Boone didn't flinch. Just stood with the stillness he carried like a tool in his belt. "You're not going anywhere in that state," he said. She tried to push herself up, failed, then braced against the wall. He saw the tremble in her arms, the filth crusted at her sleeves, the blood at her knuckles. "What's your name?" A pause. Then, "Mary," she said. "Mary Cartwright." He didn't believe her, but he nodded just the same. He stepped inside, careful not to crowd her. The chickens scattered. She didn't. "There's coffee on the stove," he said. "Clean water. A fire. You can rest a while. Then we'll talk." She didn't answer, but she looked at him like he'd said something dangerous. That's how she came to Boone Merritt's ranch. Not with a name he trusted, not with a past she could afford to tell. Just a stranger who'd slept in a chicken coop for 3 nights, and still hadn't let herself fall apart. Boone didn't ask questions that first morning. He brought her inside like he would a half-frozen animal. Slow, careful, without fanfare. The stove burned low, casting shadows on the floorboards. He laid a quilt over the old settee and poured a cup of hot water from the kettle. No tea leaves. Just steam and warmth. She sat stiffly, her fingers wrapped around the tin cup like it was life itself. Her eyes kept drifting to the door, as if it might fling open and drag her back to wherever she'd come from. The silence was interrupted by small footsteps. Bare, light, cautious. Ellie, age 7, peeked around the doorway with a knit doll clutched to her chest. Her brother Tommy, a year or 2 older, hung back with suspicion in his eyes and a slingshot in his hand. "Pa?" Tommy asked. "Who's that?" Boone didn't look up from stoking the fire. "Just someone in need of rest." "Is she staying?" Ellie whispered. Boone stood and turned. "For now." Delilah didn't speak. She held her cup and stared at the flames like they might hold an answer. She looked older than she was. Not by lines on her face, but by the way she sat, as if she hadn't rested in years. Boone noticed how she flinched when Ellie approached. How she didn't remove her gloves even near the fire. How her eyes scanned the room before settling on the window, like a compass needle twitching north. Later, when she'd fallen asleep curled on the settee, Boone stepped outside to split wood. The rhythm calmed him. He wasn't a man drawn to strays or stories. But the girl in the chicken coop, no, the girl who called herself Mary, had a look about her, not lost, not broken but bracing. Inside, Ellie laid a blanket over the woman's legs without waking her. Tommy watched her, like one watches a fire too close to dry timber. "She's hidin' something," he muttered. Boone didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew he thought the same. By nightfall, the stranger in their home had eaten 3 bites of stew, asked for nothing, and spoken not a single truth. But Boone had seen her flinch at the sound of a wagon wheel outside. He'd seen the way she pressed her fingers into her palm, like she was remembering something she'd rather forget. And for reasons he couldn't quite name, he let her stay another night. By the second morning, she was up before the rooster. Boone found her outside, chopping carrots with a dull kitchen knife, sleeves rolled to her elbows, the hem of her dress damp with dew. "You didn't have to do that," he said, stepping off the porch. She didn't look at him. "I don't take charity." He studied her a moment. The set of her shoulders, the quiet grit in her voice. He nodded. Fair enough. That morning, the house smelled of stew and bread. The kind that fills a space too long emptied of comfort. Ellie twirled in her little chair when she saw the pot. Tommy gave a grunt that meant approval. Delilah ladled the stew with care but didn't serve herself. "Ain't you gonna eat?" Ellie asked. Delilah glanced up. "Not yet. I'll wait." Boone watched her across the table. She didn't meet his eyes. Didn't need to. He could see she was still a guest in her own skin. Later that day, she gathered eggs from the coop and hung laundry out to dry. She mended Ellie's dress without being asked. She swept the floors and folded the blankets, her movements careful, precise, practiced. Like someone who'd done it 1,000 times. For someone who never said thank you. Boone worked the field that day. But every now and then, his gaze drifted toward the house. Not because he didn't trust her. Because he did, and couldn't figure why. It was Tommy who voiced what Boone kept to himself. "She ain't just passing through, is she?" The boy asked, squinting toward the porch. Boone didn't answer at first. He jammed the spade into the earth and leaned on it. "Sometimes folks don't run unless they got a reason." "You think someone's looking for her?" Boone looked toward the hills, where the wind stirred the dry grass. "I think someone already found her, and she's trying to forget." That night, Delilah sat by the fire with Ellie curled beside her, head on her lap. She stroked the girl's hair without thinking, her hand moving in soft, absent rhythm. Her other hand held a torn scrap of paper tucked behind her apron. Boone watched her from the kitchen doorway. She looked peaceful. Not happy. Not safe, but at peace. Like a woman pausing between storms. And yet he knew it wouldn't last. Not without the truth. And not while shadows still clung to her name. The first sign came with the letter. A stranger rode into Willow Creek, with a leather satchel and questions on his tongue. He left a message at the general store, sealed in wax and addressed to Miss Mary Cartwright. No one by that name lived in town. But the clerk, a woman with sharp memory and sharper ears, remembered Boone Merritt had taken in a girl not long ago. Boone found the letter waiting on his porch rail when he came in from the field. Inside, Delilah stood at the stove, stirring biscuits into gravy. The scent of brown butter filled the room. But when she saw the paper in Boone's hand, the ladle slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. Boone didn't answer right away. He crossed the room, held the envelope out. "Care to explain who's sending you letters under the name you gave me?" Delilah's hand stayed at her sides. Still. Empty. "No." Boone's jaw worked. He didn't press. Not yet. But he watched her face change, watched the blood drain and the walls rise. That night, long after the children had gone to bed, Boone found her sitting outside on the porch swing, arms wrapped tight around herself like she was holding in a scream. "I was promised to a man," she said before he could speak. "Back east. My father arranged it. Said he was wealthy. Proper. said I'd be taken care of. Boone leaned against the post in silence. He wasn't kind. She continued, her voice low. He wasn't even patient. The first time I said no, he locked me in the cellar. The second time, he showed me what happened to women who disobeyed. She looked up then, and her eyes weren't pleading. They were hollow, rimmed with quiet fire. I didn't run because I was spoiled. I ran because I was going to die in that house. And no one would have cared. Boone didn't reach for her. Didn't speak right away. The wind moved between them soft and dry. You should have told me, he said. Would you have let me stay? He hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he did. Yes, he said finally. But I wouldn't have waited so long to start worrying. They didn't speak much after that. But the silence felt different now. Not like absence, but like space waiting to be filled. And somewhere beyond the fields, past the low ridge and the hush of pine, a rider turned his horse toward the valley, with Harlan Brewer's name on his lips. The man rode into town like he owned it. Clean boots, pressed collar, gloves softer than anything sold in Willow Creek. His horse was black as a coal vein and twice as mean. He asked questions with a calm, clipped voice. Too calm for a man looking for a runaway bride. Delilah Carr, he said at the post office. Traveling under the name Mary Cartwright. Have you seen her? He showed a sketch. Unsmiling. Unmistakable. By sundown, word reached Boone's ranch. It always did in towns like that. News didn't travel. It leapt. Tommy brought it home first, breathless from the general store. A man is in town asking about her, he said. Riding a black horse. Says she's his wife. Delilah dropped the bowl she was drying. It shattered against the sink. Her hands didn't move. Neither did her eyes. Boone didn't ask if it was him. He didn't need to. He stood in the center of the kitchen and looked at her, like a man who had just watched a window crack. Slow and final. We'll handle it, he said. How? She asked, her voice barely breath. You saw what he's capable of from a letter. You haven't met him in the flesh. Boone set his jaw. Then I guess it's time I did. That night, Boone sat alone in the barn, sharpening a hoe blade not because it was dull, but because it kept his hands from doing something foolish. He had taken in a stranger. Now he found himself defending her like she was his own blood. Or something even more dangerous. Something like hope. In town, Harlan Brewer booked a room above the saloon, paid extra for privacy, declined whiskey, and stared long into the mirror, like a man rehearsing kindness until it looked natural. The next morning, Boone saddled his horse and rode into Willow Creek. He didn't bring a rifle, just a question and a name. He found Harlan outside the sheriff's office, adjusting his gloves like the dust offended him. I believe you've been asking about someone staying on my land, Boone said evenly. Harlan turned, smiled without warmth. You must be the rancher. Boone, is it? That's right. Then you've been harboring my fiancée. Miss Carr and I have a legal arrangement. Boone's voice didn't rise. She says otherwise. She's confused. Fragile. She's run before. He leaned in slightly. I'm here to bring her home. I suggest you stay out of it. Boone stepped closer. She's already home. Neither man moved. The wind stirred dust around their boots. For a moment, it looked like a fight might break open right there. But Harlan smiled again, a thin blade of a smile. We'll see what the law says. And with that, he turned and walked inside, boots polished, heart black. That evening the sky hung low and violet. The kind of dusk that made every shadow feel like a warning. Delilah stood at the sink, scrubbing a plate that was already clean. Her sleeves were wet, her eyes distant. Boone came in from the porch, silent as always. But there was something different in his stillness, like the ground before thunder. He's not leaving, is he? She asked, without turning. Boone took off his hat, hung it by the door. No, he said. Not yet. He will find a way. He always does. She gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. He will say I'm his, that I'm mad, that I belong to him. And there won't be a thing I can say to undo it. Boone crossed the room slowly, stopped just short of her. There's one thing. She turned, guarded. What? He didn't flinch. Marry me. The words landed hard between them. No softness, no romance, just wait. What? She said again, voice hollow. He's claiming legal right, Boone said. If you and I were married, truly married, he'd lose that claim. The law might not always protect the vulnerable, but it still respects a husband's shield. Delilah stared at him, not with anger, not even surprise, but exhaustion. You don't know me. I know enough, he replied. You don't owe me anything. Ain't about owing, Boone said. It's about choosing. He looked at her then fully. No pity. Just a steady, quiet kind of honor. You deserve safety. And I've got room for one more under this roof. She turned away, blinking hard. And what about your children? What kind of example is marrying a stranger? You're not a stranger to them, he said. And truth is, you're not a stranger to me anymore either. The room fell still except for the ticking of the mantel clock. Delilah's fingers traced the edge of the counter, like she was trying to remember the shape of courage. It wouldn't be real, she said. This marriage. Boone nodded slowly. Not at first. He paused, voice lower now. But that don't mean it wouldn't matter. And so they stood in the quiet heart of the house. Not as lovers, not yet. But as two people who had weathered too much alone, and were finally willing to try something different, a truce, a promise, a beginning. They were married on a Thursday morning. No lace, no veil. Just Boone in his cleanest shirt, Delilah in her mended dress, and a witness from the feed store who owed Boone a favor. The vows were brief. No ring, no kiss. Just two names spoken together, Merritt and Carr, and a line drawn in the sand where no one else could cross. Harlan Brewer didn't take it well. He stormed into the sheriff's office with a copy of the original engagement contract, a formal agreement signed by her late father, and a list of grievances, delivered in a voice smooth as a courtroom lawyer. She's my fiancée, he insisted. She's mentally unwell. I have documentation. Her family entrusted her to my care. The sheriff leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. She's Boone Merritt's wife now, he said, thumbing through the marriage record. That makes her a citizen of this town. And under this roof, a man doesn't get to call a woman his property. But Harlan wasn't finished. No, he waited until Saturday market, when the whole town spilled onto Main Street. Children racing between wagons, pies cooling on tables, chickens pecking at spilled seed. That's when he made his move. Delilah had gone into town with Ellie to trade eggs. Boone stayed back to fix the barn roof. She didn't see Harlan until he was standing in front of her, hat in hand, eyes cold behind the practiced smile. Delilah, he said gently. It's time to come home. Ellie froze. Delilah didn't move. You've made your point, he continued. But this game has gone on long enough. Your father would be ashamed. Delilah stepped in front of Ellie. My father is dead, and so is whatever promise he made to you. Harlan's hand twitched toward her arm. That's when the voice cut through the crowd like a rifle shot. Take one more step. Boone growled, and you'll regret it. The market went still. Even the chickens stopped their scratching. Boone walked forward, slow and solid, every inch the wall between them. You've had your say, he told Harlan. Now I'll have mine. He stood between them now, eyes locked on the man who'd haunted Delilah's past. She's my wife. And she's not leaving. Harlan's mouth curled. You think this backwoods farce will hold up in court? Boone didn't blink. You think the law's your sword, but it ain't. Not here. Here, it's the line we stand on. And you just crossed it. The sheriff appeared behind Harland, hand on his belt buckle. Mr. Brewer, he said plainly, I think it's time you left town. Harland looked at them all. The sheriff, the townsfolk, the woman who no longer flinched in his shadow, and for the first time, found himself outnumbered. He tipped his hat, forced a smile that broke at the edges, and walked away. Delilah turned toward Boone. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were clear. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Boone met her gaze. But I wanted to. Spring came late that year. The thaw moved in slow, like it was testing its welcome. Snowmelt trickled through the fields, loosening the dirt where the frost had once held everything tight. Delilah planted herbs beneath the porch rail. Not because they were needed, but because they were hers now. Something small and green and growing. Something she chose. Inside, Ellie practiced her letters beside the hearth, while Tommy worked the gate without being told. Boone built a swing on the cottonwood tree. Not for any reason but joy. And Delilah, she began to laugh. Not often, not loudly, but freely. One morning, Boone found her in the garden, brushing soil from her fingers. Her sleeves were rolled, her hair pinned loose. The earth clung to her in quiet streaks, like it belonged there. The lettuce is coming up crooked, she said without turning. Boone stepped beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes soft. It's trying, though. She smiled faintly. Ain't that enough? They stood together in the hush of the morning, the light climbing through the branches, the wind slow and warm. Their hands rested inches apart. Neither one reached. Not yet. I meant what I said, Boone murmured. She glanced toward him. Back in town? You're my wife. Not just on paper. Delilah's breath caught, just slightly. He looked at her. Not with pressure, not with pride, but with the steady kind of knowing that only comes after storms. I didn't marry you to save you, he said. I married you 'cause somewhere along the way, I started hoping you'd stay. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his hand. Fingers rough from work meeting fingers raw from healing, and laced them together. Slow and sure. Then I reckon I already have, she whispered. Boone stepped closer. The air between them shifted, gentle, expectant. Delilah tilted her chin, just slightly, as if the answer to every question lived in that breath between them. And then he kissed her. Not with heat or urgency, but with certainty. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask permission, because permission had already been given, in silences, in meals shared, in safety offered and returned. The clouds opened just a little, casting golden light across the ridge and the porch, and the garden they'd tended together. And for the first time since she'd crawled out of that coop, Delilah Carr, now Delilah Merritt, didn't feel like she was hiding. She felt like she belonged. Some stories don't end in thunder or fire. Some just unfold like spring, quiet, steady, and worth the wait.